I have been recently thinking about the difference between an explanation that is not an excuse and an explanation that is an excuse. So maybe we should start with just what is an excuse. An excuse is an explanation. So every excuse will be usually some form of an explanation. But it's a specific kind of explanation. It's an explanation that is aimed to reduce our moral responsibility. So not every explanation is an excuse. As a scientist, I'm explaining how sheets fall in a viscous fluid and why they do the way they do it. But these are not excuses. I'm not searching for excuses, I'm searching for explanations. These are mechanistic processes. There are no moral agents involved in it. These are just inanimate things. So an explanation that tries to reduce our moral responsibility, that's a kind of an excuse. We give an excuse so that other person will not think that we have done something wrong or evil. We give an excuse, and that gives us prevents us from being morally judged. But, of course, excuses sometimes can be silly. I will not be talking about silly excuses. Silly excuses are those that don't really have any logic to them. If someone just makes an explanation that is just completely incoherent logically, we basically say that's not an excuse. That excuse does not make any sense. And so I will usually, when we say that I have an excuse, we usually mean that we have a valid excuse. So when is an explanation a valid excuse? So as I was thinking about that, I think that the best way to say that an explanation is also a valid excuse is when the explanation provided for the excuse shows that the probability of a desired outcome is low. So for example, this kind of excuse can appeal to some external factors. So for example, if I can say that, I was late for this party because as I was traveling, there was a terrible accident and there was a huge traffic jam and there was nothing I could have done about it. So these were due to factors beyond my control. I was late. So these are external factors, and that kind of fits into our basically the probability that I would have been on time, given that explanation that there was that huge traffic jam due to some terrible accident. That explanation renders the outcome, the different outcome of me being actually on time, very low probability. On the other hand, interestingly, there are some instances when it can be solely depending on me, and yet I still can have a valid excuse. So for example, if someone invites me to a party, but I already have 5 other people have also invited me to 5 other parties, obviously I have to make a choice. I can't attend all 6 parties. But there isn't anything outside of me that governs, oh, I must do that. So that's a completely my choice. And I can just say, well, listen, I can't come to your party, or won't come to your party because I have been invited to all these other parties, and I've made my choice about where I'm going. So in that sense, it still works because I have explained, like, oh, I have among those 6 different parties, the probability that I'm going to choose yours is low because I'm basically busy. So I have so many different options. The particular probability that I will come to yours is very low. And of course, the more parties I attend, I have on offer, the lower the probability and the better the excuse. So there's sometimes explanations that render the probability of the desired outcome to be very low. These are valid excuses. But sometimes explanations are good explanations, but terrible excuses, or not very good excuses. So I think that's very important in many of our everyday discussions, because sometimes we might think that, oh, someone explains someone's behavior, so he is excusing them, but no, it's might not even be meant to be an excuse. An explanation is not an excuse when something could have been done about it. So, for example, if I was late to some party or some meeting, I could have a good explanation why I was late. I was late because I overslept. Obviously, that is a good explanation in terms of just the mechanism of why you have been late, but it's not an excuse. It's not an excuse because I could have set up an alarm, I could have asked someone to wake me up, I could have went to sleep earlier. There is a whole host of things that I could have done about the situation. And similar explanations. For example, I did not attend the meeting because I forgot. That's also an explanation. Of course, how can you attend the meeting if you have forgotten? But it's not an excuse. Again, an explanation is not an excuse if it still explains the data, the why things have happened, but there have been other things that could have been done about it. So someone could have could have prevented the unfortunate situation. Also, the second type of explanations that are not an excuse are the ones that are not aimed at reducing your moral responsibility. So, for example, I can say that I ate cake before dinner because I gave in to the temptation. There was that cake on the table. I felt like, yeah, I'm not going to wait until dinner. I just ate it. And I gave in. I'm admitting my weakness. I'm not making an excuse here. Another example would be, I did this because I was selfish. This is an explanation. Many things can be explained by selfishness. I might have disrespected someone, or ignored someone's petition for help or something like that. I just ignored them because I was selfish, for selfish reasons, and that is an explanation. But it's not an excuse, and it's not that explanation is not meant to reduce my moral responsibility in this situation. Yeah, so I think this consideration might be useful in understanding that if someone explains why someone else did it, that doesn't mean they're excusing them. For example, psychologists may explain or try to understand the psychology of a serial killer, and even if we have a full psychological understanding of how the mind of a serial killer works, or of a psychopath, this is not an explanation. This is not an excuse. These are only explanations. Just because we understand how some of how the mind of a serial killer works, it doesn't mean that serial killing is in any way excused. It's still an evil. These explanations are not meant to reduce the moral responsibility of that act. Yeah. I think it's sometimes difficult to discern whether someone giving an explanation, are they giving an excuse or not? It can be very tricky. So yeah, sometimes you can think on TV someone says something, and one person will interpret, oh, he is making excuses, and the other person will say, no, he's just making an explanation, but it's not an excuse.